First of all, a big thank you to the New York Green Party. I still have very fond memories of my visit in the fall, and I wondered whether going overnight from Chicago both ways was going to be worth it, and it certainly was. Jill is going to be our candidate, and I understand that. The reason I stay in this is because I want to discuss some structural questions, things that I have campaigned on, written on, researched for years and years. And I also want to talk a little bit about ideology. Let's be real clear. I do not want a formal ideology for the Green Party. I can't think of anything more divisive. But I do think that we can come to some understandings of some commonalities and build a floor of ideological, dare I say, philosophical foundation that will strengthen our position, not only internally, but externally. Show people really where we're coming from, which is a little bit more than simply taking positions on contemporary topical issues. I think with the exception of a couple of foreign policy things, my views are very, very similar to Jill's. But I think we need a floor of ideological understanding, and I want to contribute to that. Third thing I will say is I hope that no one was offended by my press release about Governor Cuomo. I meant what I said. I think one of the things we can do to deal with the Israeli lobby in this country, which is out of control, except for the control that it has over our government, is to begin to say that these people need to register as foreign agents. What Cuomo did with this guy from Israel standing right behind him, it's just outrageous. It's un-American. I am a veteran. Maybe some of you saw my press release. My father fought the Nazis. He was an officer in the Order of the British Empire. He was made by His Majesty George VI. My great-grandfather was wounded in the Civil War, shot in Tennessee. I'm a member of the Sons of Union Veterans. I am a patriot in the old progressive sense, and I want to repatriate the word patriotism. And people like Cuomo and other, I mean, just think, 3/4 of our Congress goes to AIPAC. 83 senators endorse upping the military support for Israel. We need to take our country back, and particularly our foreign policy back. So I hope no one was offended. I don't like your governor very much. I love New York. All right, fine. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to do something with you New York people that I have not done with anybody else. You're a smart group of people, and I found that out. I expected that, and I was not in the least disappointed. I'm going to mention three things. Move over to the right hemisphere, please, okay? We're going to do about 3 minutes of abstract thinking, and I'm going to give you what I think is the foundation for an ideological position. The first is this. I don't think there's any doubt that the classical dialectic, known as the idealistic dialectic sometimes, the mind-first view of the world, is now properly ascending to its position of being the principal dialectic. Not to say that the dialectical materialists did not contribute something. I'm rather fond of Marx's economic and philosophical manuscripts. There's some psychology in there when Marx talks about the various alienations. And I certainly agree that there is surplus value. It still is, okay? In some ways, it's worse in our country than it's been for maybe since the Gilded Age. And but there is a classical dialectic. It goes back to Plato and the Phaedo. It's in Michelangelo. It's in Leonardo. Andre Malraux talked about the forms and all of this in his history of art. I mean, this is the classical position, and it is reasserting itself. And I would suggest that that is a very major intellectual thing which is happening. Okay? The second thing is that there is now a reunification of philosophy and psychology. Psychology split off at the beginning of the 20th century. There was a wonderful German scientist by the name of Wilhelm Wundt, who began experimental psychology right around the beginning of the 20th century. And psychology and the human nature question kind of got captured by a subfield, psychology. Let's be clear, philosophy is the queen of the sciences. Philosophy sits at the top of the pyramid of knowledge. And what is very, very heartwarming to me is that the human nature question, which was always the core question in philosophy, going back to Socrates' notion of knowing thyself and Sophocles' notion of who am I? What am I doing here? This has now come back, and I think we now have enough of a convergence between philosophy and psychology that we can really build something. Third and last in this is that we now have physiological confirmation. Recent research, the cognitive research that's going on is absolutely wonderful, okay? Don't be fearful of that. It can help us because there is something in all of our brains. It's called the anterior cingulate cortex. It sits on top of the corpus callosum. Those of us on the progressive side of the ideological spectrum have more sophisticated anterior cingulate cortexes. We can deal with more variables and we can deal with complex variables, meaning apples and oranges, okay? Therefore, there is something now coming together, these three things together, which lays a foundation for us to build a very, very powerful ideological argument that underpins all of our views on the environment, anti-war, social justice, anti-corporate, blah, blah, blah. You know, all of the things that we hold dear. So that's an important thing. What I suggest is that we are coming to a point in which there will be what I call the horizontal revolution. Look at my fingers, okay? Men have dominated women. Employers have dominated employees, all right? Whites have dominated blacks. Straights have dominated gays, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are objective groupings. But now there is a cross weave, okay? A cross weave. And what that cross weave does is say, look, there is a subjective reinforcement. Think of it, if you wish, as the material of your shirt or blouse. If you had only vertical threads, it wouldn't amount to much, okay? We are now getting a very good foundation for the horizontal threads, which will build a strong fabric. We must not only engage in those vertical revolutions or those objective things that I just mentioned, but also a horizontal revolution, which says the way we think about it. It's not just what we think, it's how we think. And we think in a way that is more sophisticated and ultimately superior to those on the right. And we should use that and when we talk about individual specific things. All right. There is much more that I could talk about, but I think that's about 5 minutes. You wanted some time for questions, and I will gladly stand for questions.
If you have questions, you can come up here to the mic.
Hello, Mr. Kreml. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on your belief of the split in the Constitution between the Articles and the Bill of Rights.
There is no question that the people who were in the Philadelphia Convention were basically conservatives. I'm hardly the first person to have said that, but you have to kind of remind yourself of it. And the original 7 articles had at its great purpose to obstruct the aggregation of the mob, the vox populi. They were very suspicious of it. And Hamilton, there's a great play on Broadway and so forth, but Hamilton was a very conservative guy. And what he put together, not just in the Constitution, and he was a major figure in the writing of the Constitution, but he was a major figure in the writing of the Federalist Papers. In fact, he and Madison wrote all but 5 of the Federalist Papers. And This was a pro-creditor document, okay? The one thing I ever agreed with Antonin Scalia on was that the Constitution is basically a battle between creditors and debtors. And I think that's right. And there's no question that the people in the Philadelphia Convention, with the possible exception of Franklin, who was 81 years old and was really past his prime, were creditor favoring people. Okay. What does the Bill of Rights do? Okay. It is the complement to the original 7 articles. It is ideologically the other side. Why do you have the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of association, these kinds of things, to permit aggregation? And that was the response of the anti-federalists to the Federalists. All right, Federalists were the conservatives. They were responsible for the original 7 articles. The anti-Federalists were the liberals, and they believed that the people should be able to aggregate and should be able to do things through the public sector that checked abusive private power. That's my short answer.
I have one question on money in politics. In green and progressive circles, there's a lot of talk about using the Constitution to challenge Citizens United, and of course there's Buckley v. Valeo. What do you think is the best mechanism in this government to challenge or change campaign finance?
Well, I am very, excuse me, go ahead. Fine. I think the best method is to use an argument which is very complex, and we really don't have time, but to use the 7th Amendment. Almost nobody pays attention to the 7th Amendment. But what the 7th Amendment did, and I wrote a piece for the American Constitution Society, which is the opposite of the Federalist Society, and I wrote a book, and I said, look, the way to beat this argument is use the 7th Amendment, because what the 7th Amendment said was that once there was a ruling at the jury level that a contract was an unfavorable contract, it was inequitable, that the appeals court, which the anti-federalists anticipated would be made up of federalist judges, could not overturn that fact finding. Okay, every legal case has facts and law. All right. If the trial court found that the contract was inequitable, that the bank or the lender took advantage of the farmer or whoever, that ruling, that fact ruling, could not be overturned. Okay. And what I argue is this, that there is a qualitative, not just a quantitative, but a qualitative difference between small contributions and large contributions. Small contributions, yes, that is a kind of speech. And the reason is because you're only giving $50, $100, and you know that that's going to be commingled. It's going to be synthesized. It's part of an aggregation, which was the purpose of the Bill of Rights. All right? A large contribution is not synthetic. It's analytic. It's contractual. You have a direct link to Hillary Clinton if you give her $500,000. It's of the contractual form. It is not something that the Bill of Rights protects. Okay? The Bill of Rights is a pro-aggregation, pro-small d democratic institution. All right?
Thank you. One more. Gloria Matera has a question.
Just a quick final question, Bill. Hi, it's Gloria Matera, co-chair of the Green Party of New York State.
Sure. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? So I know you have been, when you've been talking to different state Green parties, you have a particular request around delegates to support you, and we're also electing our delegates today. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to just mention that briefly.
Thank you very much. As I said before, I fully support Jill. What I want to do is continue the conversation. I'm almost 75 years old, but I want to continue the conversation both on the notion of structure of our government, which, you know, Barack Obama promised that he would change the way Washington worked, right? And that was his number one promise. Zip. He did nothing. It's the exact same system when he's leaving than it was when he came to office. So to answer your question, what I have asked of many states is to give me one delegate to the Houston Convention. And I have had several states who have given me one delegate. One state screwed up and gave me two. I don't know how that happened, but that's what happened. So please give me one delegate, and I will appreciate it very, very much. Thanks for an opportunity to speak to that.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.